We've made it to Speed Week. It used to be Speed Weeks, but now it's just Speed Week. So it is Wednesday morning right now. We got single car qualifying for the Daytona 500 tonight. So we will know that front row. We'll see who the front row is locked in. And then tomorrow we got the dual races. So if you haven't seen it already, posted a duals strategy video, which is up live on our YouTube channel. And it's also over on Twitter, which is at Fast Cars FM. But let's turn the page. Let's turn the chapter. Let's talk about the Daytona 500. And really, this is a strategy video. How do we want to approach the Daytona 500? How are we going to build lineups? Things to keep in mind. What we've seen in the past from his historical trends. So if you've been a part of this channel for a while, I've pretty much have made this video, I don't know, 5-6 times now. It doesn't really change too much. But if you're new, let's go ahead and talk about what the Daytona 500 is and really what it means for Draftkings and DFS purposes. So let's see here. Let's go to the preview and strategy. So we were talking about the duels. We were saying, hey, the duels are relatively, underwhelming as far as cautions go, as far as wrecks go. It should be relatively a calm race. Well, when we get to the Daytona 500, we want to take a little bit of a different approach. Normally, these races are more chaotic. We want to focus more on place differential and drivers in the back of the field versus drivers in the middle of the field for the dual races. So when we get to these super speedway races, dominator points, I don't want to say don't matter, but they're very hard to focus on. It's very hard to nail, who that potential dominator might be. And just because you're earning dominator points, if you wreck out, it's very easy to have all those dominator points washed away. So really the main focus when you get to these super speedways is place differential. What drivers can net me the most positive place differential gains in addition to, finishing well? And I want to try to get as many high-end place differential drivers into my lineup as possible. So what I would recommend if I were you, I'd wait till after the dual races conclude on Thursday. Once we wrap up that second dual race, we'll have the official starting grid for the Cup Series, which is Sunday. But honestly, this strategy applies to the Truck Series on Friday night and also the Xfinity Series on Saturday. Literally every single driver is in play. Even the teams that have crappy equipment, even the teams, maybe the driver, isn't that great. Really doesn't matter. Again, we want to focus more on place differential and starting positions than truly, who that driver is or, what equipment they're in. All we need these drivers to do is more or less stay on track and hopefully avoid what is called the big one. So when we get to these super speedway races, all the cars are normally pack racing, inches apart from one another. It only takes one lap. It only takes one driver to make a mistake, to get into another driver, to cause basically a domino effect where you have 8, 10, 12, sometimes even more than that, drivers getting involved in an accident. And usually, when they're getting involved in the accident, usually they're taking significant damage. So if they are able to continue, they're not going to be at pace, or, most likely they're going to DNF. They're not going to finish the race. So you could easily start 10th and finish, 38th in this race, which is going to be a terrible DFS day. And on the flip side, you could start 38th and finish 10th. And that's going to be a great DFS day. So again, it's trying to focus more on, stacking the back. I want to try to get as many drivers into my lineup as possible that start towards the rear half of the field, because every time there's a wreck, those drivers that are further back slowly but surely are inching their way closer to the front of the field, again, netting us positive place differential points. What we see sometimes at these super speedway races is, we race twice at Daytona, we race twice at Talladega. We also now race at Atlanta, which is still, it's a little bit different, but it's similar to super speedway racing. So we don't see the strategy work out every single time. Normally there's 1 or 2 races a year where it is a calm super speedway race. And if you're taking the stack to back approach, it's not going to be a good day for you. But what I would advise is, just kind of sit back, as sad as it is, kind of root for wrecks almost, and root for your drivers to advance their position and avoid those accidents. Dominator points, like I said, are going to be hard to come by when you're racing in a pack. Fast laps are just going to be distributed throughout the field. Kind of similar to what we saw at the LA Coliseum. That was a little bit different. There was so much traffic on that track that depending on whoever had the cleanest lap in front of them was getting the fast laps. Well, here it's really whoever is drafting the best for that lap. Whoever's sucked in behind another driver is probably going to earn those fast laps. Sometimes we'll see a train form, and if you're the front car in that train, you are picking a lot of laps led points. But again, it only takes a couple laps. You could be riding first. A guy tries to make a pass for the lead. You go to block them. You get turned, put it in the wall, and then boom, all those negative place differential points are basically just washing out those dominator points that you're earning. Again, salary does not matter. Don't be afraid to leave, thousands and hundreds of dollars left on the table. A lot of new players, when you're playing NASCAR DFS, just max out that salary. So that's a way to potentially get different. Don't be afraid. Your lineups want to look ugly. You don't want it to like your lineups, and don't be afraid with how ugly your lineups look, and how bad, the potential score looks if you were checking DraftKings throughout the race, because until there's multiple accidents, it's not going to look pretty, but the slate is going to tilt often. And you'll see how much it changes. You can go from winning money one lap to completely being out of money the next lap. It's going to be that chaotic back and forth. So yeah, really, you just want to sort the field by starting position and focus on those positions. Doesn't matter who the driver is. Doesn't matter what the equipment is. We want to play positions. Another thing to keep in mind when you get to the super speedway races is, everyone has just as high of a chance of wrecking as the next guy. So inevitably, there's going to be some drivers that are chalky, that are going to be pretty easy to figure out. Wow, this is a Hendrick Motorsports car starting 25th in the field. He's going to get a ton of ownership. Or, hey, Bubba Wallace is starting 32nd. And those are still good drivers, to potentially get in your line, but we know ownership is going to be through the roof on those drivers. So maybe it's, okay, well, what driver is starting 26th? What driver is starting, right next to Bubba Wallace? Maybe it's not a top tier team, or maybe it's not a top tier driver, but we know the ownership level is going to be significantly lower than these chalky drivers. And they have just as much upside, as that chalky driver does. And hopefully for us, the drivers with high ownership get involved in wrecks, get involved in accidents, and it gives us leverage on the field by taking some of these lower owned drivers. What I like to do when we get to the super speedways is really, I like to build multiple lineups. It's hard to be all in on one lineup just because there's so much, randomness and unpredictability that happens with these super speedway races. So normally I like to just build multiple lines and kind of see what happens. I usually enter a lot of crown entries in these races. Usually I'll accumulate a bunch of crowns, over the course of the NASCAR season. And I always like to kind of start off the season just entering basically all the crowns that I entered last year. And yeah, so we have salaries, but again, salaries don't really matter. Once we know the starting grid, we'll post this spreadsheet before they start, our interest level and kind of why we like them. But honestly, it's going to look pretty similar like this when we're done. Again, it's going to be, doesn't matter who the driver is, doesn't matter the equipment, none of that matters. It's more playing the starting grid. So what I usually tell people is just try to find your cutoff point. So I usually don't play any drivers in the top 10. They don't really have enough upside and there's too much downside to them. Even if I have a driver that starts 31st and wrecks out, it's not going to kill my lineup. But if I have a driver that starts 7th and wrecks out, it's going to be a lot harder for me to cash. Normally, we see the optimal lineup have at least one or two drivers that start a little bit closer to the front of the field. So if you're trying to nail the optimal lineup, maybe you try to get more aggressive. But that's kind of like a really high risk, high reward, type of approach, where if you just kind of play drivers towards the back half of the field, it's a little bit of a safer approach. You might not hit the optimal lineup, but you might get close to that optimal lineup. And if you have a lot of entries that are taking this strategy and there's wrecks and it plays out to your advantage, you're going to have a really good day in DFS. And that's honestly what my goal is just trying to build as many lineups as I can that have the highest probability of cashing that day. So you can sort the field by starting position, find your cutoff points. Maybe it's 15th, maybe it's 20th, maybe it's 25th, whatever it is. And then we want a bulk of our drivers starting below, that cutoff point. So if it's 20th, maybe I want 5 drivers who start 20th or worse, and maybe my X drivers, in that 15th to 19th range. Maybe I want all 6 of my drivers starting 25th on back. And again, we'll be able to tell, what drivers towards the back half of the field are going to carry significantly higher ownership than potentially a driver maybe starting right next to them that has just as much of an upside potential that they do. So it's really trying to focus on these starting positions, and then also taking it one step further, trying to get some of these lower owned plays into our lineups to get leverage on the field. It's pretty much it, from a strategy perspective goes. Don't really overthink it. Sort it by starting position, find those drivers in the back half of the field, put your feet up, and then hopefully we have some accidents, we have some cautions. So yeah, we'll post this spreadsheet on Twitter. It's at FastCarsFM. Once the dual races conclude, like I said, if you haven't seen our dual race breakdown, please go watch that. It's a little bit of a different approach than the stack the back, Daytona 500. And again, this strategy, even though this is focused more on the Cup Series, it applies just as well to the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. So best of luck to everybody, and hope everyone has a good speed week. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and good luck.